Darcy, is there any? No, okay. So we will move on to number 4, approval of today's agenda. This is an action item.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Is moved and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries tonight 5-0. Moving on to consent items. This is an action item as well. I'll look for approval.
So moved.
Is there- Okay, it's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye, that word. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to superintendent's report.
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, directors, public, and our welcome to our new student representatives, both Max and Carly. So I'll give you an opportunity later to introduce yourself, but we want to say welcome. We're excited to have you to join us at the dais. A couple, as we celebrate our schools, you'll hear tonight around the state of our schools and the state of the district. So it'll be nice to hear from our building leaders about the schools and their strategies. But thinking about the past couple weeks, I just want to highlight a couple of the involvements at the school. In the elementary school engagements, there were multiple opportunities to be out in the school with the Welcome Back and the school picnics. It was nice to see making those connections with our families and our caregivers. Also in the walkathon, many parents and caregivers participated as well as our students. It was nice to see them actively walking on such a beautiful day. So thank you to all those involved, and I know that other schools will be participating moving forward. At the high school was a big week last week with the Pep Fest. It was nice to see all the students and the excitement from our cheer team to our dance team. Also the homecoming parade, just to see the community come out and support our athletes. It was definitely, the weather was nice as well, but it was overwhelming to see the support of the community out and about. The homecoming coronation was a wonderful event in the auditorium, and congratulations to our king and queen. The Powder Puff game was a fun and warm activity. I know that the juniors and seniors had a pretty competitive engagement out on the field, but also our teachers participating with the students, and I do believe that the students took it to the teachers, so congratulations to the students on that. And then the Tiger Spirit Festival last Friday, we engaged at the high school with our community. So thank you for all those who came out. It was great to see our families and caregivers and staff engaging in another wonderful opportunity. The homecoming football game, way to go Tigers. We got a great victory. It shows the perseverance from our student athletes and how they never stop. And it's the belief in what is possible. So well done to our Tiger football team. Staff development and learning walks, just a couple things that we've been doing. We've been out in the buildings, both the secondary and elementary, and walking with the instructional leadership team at the building to look at some of their effective teaching practices and the implementation of some of their strategies that they're doing in their school continuous improvement plans. And finally, today was an Albert Lee Academy Day. We heard great feedback, was out and about just engaging with the staff. All staff across Albert Lee represent our core value of always learning. It was great to see them and learning on this day. I know students were home, but the teachers were in school and deepening their learning in the different areas of pedagogy. So that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Wagner. Neil, let's start with you. You could fight.
All right. I will try to keep it short. Most of my attention, don't look so dubious. Most of my attention has been connected with the Education Foundation lately. It's a busy time for us because the Pathways to Success event, the reception we held at the Wedgwood Cove on Thursday, October 10th, and I'm the one that is charged with the responsibility for doing not all of the heavy lifting, but a fair amount of it. And I'm always nervous about that. If I were ever not nervous, I would be nervous about not being nervous. So it's going to be an interesting, if it will be 4 distinguished alumni, 4 distinguished educators. I'm not going to try to remember all of them now because I would probably forget somebody. But plans are well underway. I have a lot of the things taken care of, and we're looking forward to that event. I was really impressed with the homecoming activities, the ones that I was able to attend. For the first time in many, many, many years, I actually was at the coronation ceremony along with Superintendent Wagner and Angie. And congratulations to King Attig and Queen Wackles. I know them both. That was exciting. And the result of the football game was great. That event out on the campus, we have a wonderful campus at our high school, and tremendous facilities there and all kinds of wonderful natural resources outside. And the event took place on the lawn in front of the Commons. And I got to watch our superintendent respond to the challenge to do 20 push-ups so he could get a wrestling T-shirt, and that was impressive. Good job, Ron. All right, that's it.
All right, I don't have committee meetings to report, but I have been, like Neil, all over the place in the district lately. Since our last meeting, I was able to tour Brookside here with Superintendent Wagner, and I also toured Southwest with Superintendent Wagner and Principal Johnson. That was a great experience. This Friday, I'll be touring Halverson at 1:30, and I was going to mention if anyone wants to come with me, they're welcome to, as long as we don't have a quorum, of course. I believe I'll be making it out to all the schools at some point, and others are welcome to come with if you'd like to. I've been using my new pass that we got at our last meeting. I've been to 6 games, including the winning football game. That was fantastic. I saw a comment on Facebook that the ending was like watching a movie, and it really was. It was pretty cool. For homecoming, I went to the homecoming parade downtown. I went to the coronation with Neil. That was nice of you to sit by me. I got the full family history of our homecoming queens, all the athletes and her families, so that was very fun. And I went to the Tiger Spirit Festival. I must have just missed you, Neil. But I did hear about the push-ups that happened. And then, again, I went to the football game. So it's been keeping me busy, but all very enjoyable, fun stuff. So that's what I've got.
Very good. Attended some, or participated in some MSBA workshops. One was the READ Act. I think it was about reimbursement of staff for professional development and the Title IX, and really wonderful overview of the political scene based on survey data done by a firm out of the cities. Committee-wise, of policy and finance committees have met. Angie attended a number of athletic contests, and boy, I tell you, that volleyball game on Thursday and that football game, holy cow. It was just incredible. My son-in-law is the sports director at Power 96, and on your smart TV, if you download Boxcast, you can get, you can watch it on your TV, and it's recorded. So I had friends over last night, or yesterday for the Vikings game, and we must have watched that replay of those last 2 minutes about 5 times. It was just awesome, so that was fun. Did the homecoming parade, took my 3-year-old, and he told me that if you eat too much candy, you get sick. So I only ate half of what he took in. The other thing that I experienced participating in activities here is just noticing security. I was impressed with the security at the football game. I noticed they had students could leave or other people could leave, but they could not come back. And all of that was handled, I think, very respectfully. And my sense is the people understood why there was somewhat of a restriction there on movement. I also did commend Ron and his staff for the communication on our security protocols. We had some social media concerns, and also Principal Dibble had a really good article about security protocols, and I really appreciate that type of communication. And then finally, I have joined the Riverland PSCO Concurrent Enrollment Advisory Committee. And actually, out of that meeting came not a concern, but a need for Albert Lee, and that is providing concurrent tech math, so more applicable math tied to industry, technology. So I will follow up in communication, but that was an emerging need. But very strong positive words about Albert Lee's concurrent enrollment offerings and the faculty. So it was good to be a part of that committee. That's my report.
I had no committee meetings this month, and I was in Chicago over the weekend, so I didn't get to see the Tigers' big win, but I did attend the parade, and that was fun. My granddaughter's playing soccer, so I'm attending a lot of soccer games, and I'll be attending the Education Foundation celebration next Thursday. And since Neil didn't remember, the alumni being honored are Grant Aarons, 86 graduate, 10 Unseth, 64, Tom Butch, 64, Dwayne Aaron, 79. The educators are John Cliff, Glenn Parsons, Bob Bertelson, and Charlie Carpenter. And it's always a great time to do that. And then I get to have breakfast at Sibley on Thursday, so looking forward to that.
You didn't mention that two of those distinguished alumni were classmates of ours.
Yeah, they were, yeah, two of them.
Neil reminds us too that he had nothing to do with that. They were nominated by someone else. Yep, yep. So thank you for your reports. Just a lot of echoing of what fellow board members have indicated. The thing that I will share is just the feeling of the positive energy at all the events, and just choose joy is what I kept thinking when I was at those events. I also want to thank the district leadership team for being very prompt on questions and getting feedback on anything that I have a question on, as well as Superintendent Wagner meeting with us on a regular basis, just having a conversation is just really helpful to prepare us for this table, and appreciate that. I too had pulled out my invitation, so good job, way to go, Bruce. We really would like to have everybody that can attend. It is a way to celebrate our successes, for sure. And I think, yeah, there was no committee meetings that I attended. So I think we're done. So we would typically have teacher report, but they're not here, so we'll have our student reports. And, oh, I'm so sorry. No, come join us. Yes, so sorry. No, that's okay. Thank you for whoever helped out with that. Yeah, great. I'm sorry.
Nothing was caught on camera, it was all this way.
Let's see, the third graders in our district attended a field trip at the Freeborn County Farm Tour last week and had raving things to say about it. They got to see all sorts of different farm animal, beef cattle, and dairy cattle. Just gonna be done now. They got different kinds of healthy snacks and had lots of great things to say about that. Lakeview would like to report that they are super excited that their remodel is done and they will be ready to check out books starting tomorrow to the kids. So they're very pumped for that. 7th graders at Southwest will be going to the Big Island Rendezvous this week, and that's a great opportunity for them to see about different experiences that Americans had throughout history and ask questions of the presenters and the reenactors. And the ALC also would like to report they've settled into their new location at Brookside, and they've been working very hard to create an opportunity of connectedness, and they're just really feeling like that's a good situation. Yes.
All right, now It's my pleasure to introduce our student school board members for this year. It's Carly Ladley, who's a junior, and Max Richards, who is a senior. We would invite Neil to share his microphone with them so they can give us a little information about themselves.
There, it's live.
Okay. Okay, so like she said, my name is Carly Ladley, and I am a junior. I am a part of many things at ALHS. Tennis, mock trial, the journalism program. I'm part of the Alahasa. I'm a writer. And yeah, we're doing really great stuff with those things. Tennis just did Big 9 on Saturday. And they have their section meet on Tuesday against Lakeville, I think. I feel like I should know that, but you know. Homecoming was amazing. I will say that. I had a lot of fun. But we're also doing a lot of things this upcoming week for Haney's humanities social class. We're doing the presentation for the 5th graders at the Historical Museum, so that'll be fun. And on Tuesday for Alahasa, I will be going to the U of M for the state convention, so that'll be fun. Hopefully we'll win some awards. And then I'll turn it over to Max, I guess, now.
So my name is Max Richards, and I'm a senior. At the high school, my largest involvements are in Link Crew, National Honor Society, and I'm also involved in band and choir, and pretty much like every possible thing that I can be in pertaining those. So basically every music thing at the high school, I'm probably in it. Yeah, I think we had a really great homecoming this past week. I was very pleased with the student involvement at everything. Unfortunately, I was sick a couple days last week, so I wasn't able to go to quite everything, but I heard a lot of positive feedback just like throughout the day in my classes. And I think just like in general, the student spirit, like even before we won the game, obviously after we won the game, everyone was really happy. But even before that, I think we saw a lot of good participation just at school. I'm a mentor in our 8th grade band at high school, and I saw a lot of students in there like really going all out for all the dress-up days and stuff. And I feel like that's usually not something we see right away with the underclassmen. So I was really happy to see that they're showing up and supporting their class. That's all I have.
We'd like to welcome you to the board table and look forward to having you here. Moving on to number 8, curriculum and instruction, 8.1, State of the District, presented by Director Franks and principals.
Good evening, School Board, Madam Chair, Directors, and Superintendent Wagner. Tonight we will be presenting the state of the district. This is our data for school year 23-24. I really want to take a moment before we start with our data to ground us in our strategic directions. This is the work of the strategic plan that we have been doing for the last year and a half. In those strategic directions this evening, the first one on the top left, really focusing around amplifying student learning, making sure that our students are prepared for classroom and career transitions. The one next to that, also grounding us in fostering a learning environment that prioritizes academic success and mental and emotional well-being and inclusivity. Tonight you'll hear about the academic progress. And then finally, you heard Superintendent Wagner mention today being the first Academy Day, where teachers were involved in really focused professional development. I'd also like to ground us around the idea of professional development and supporting our staff in their personal and professional growth. Darcy, can you hit that X so that extra line isn't up there? Thank you. Okay, this evening you're going to see a lot of data, but I wanted to share some information to you around how to interpret the different color variations that you will see in the data this evening. All 6 of our building principals will be coming forward to share data, either in the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, which you see on the left, or Formative Assessment System for Teachers, which the acronym you've heard before is FAST, F-A-S-T. Principal Dibble will share some additional information on ACT. But these will be the 2 main color variations that you will see tonight. On the left, I just provided an example of what that variation may look like and the gradation. So that will hit 4 different areas, either the does not meet category, partially meets, meets, and exceeds. And they are stacked on one another based on where we're at. So in this example, you can see that roughly 40% of our students meet or exceed on this example. This isn't tied to any data. I just put an example up there for you to see the color variations. On the formative assessment for teachers, you will see 4 different variations. That will look at college pathways and low risk are above the midline. And then below the line in the pink colors are students that are at some risk and high risk. So as our principals are sharing their data this evening for each of their individual schools, I wanted to give you a little key so you knew what that looked like. We'll share a couple of our district-wide data before we invite Principal Dibble forward. District-wide E-reading. This is an early reading assessment that is given to our kindergarten and first grade students. This is a FAST assessment. The far left is our fall data with 37% of students at the low risk or college pathway. That increased over the year last year to 42%. So you can see in the top, and I'm walking through this with a little bit of detail for you because this is how each one of the principal slides will be. You can see over the 23-24 school year, that was an increase of 5% for our kindergarten and first grade students in reading. The second one is A reading. That was an assessment given consistently to our 2nd through 8th grade students last year. You can see in that one, over the course of last year, a decrease of 2% for the low risk and college pathways proficiency. Each of the buildings will unpack this in a bit more detail. This is the district-wide data, but then you'll be able to see at the individual site level what the growth was for individual sites. This year, this assessment will go through 10th grade. So that is one change as we align to the assessment requirements. Superintendent Wagner.
Yeah, thank you, Executive Director. Just to add the A reading, the A is for adaptive. So just to let you know that there's early reading, then there's the A is adaptive. It's an adaptive formative test. And the words college pathway, low risk, some risk, high risk, those are not Albert Lee words. Those are the FastBridge words.
Thank you. This second point of data, district-wide, this is looking at the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment data. Looking at this data line from 21 to 24 in math, reading, and science. You can see on this slide that there's very little difference in those last 4 years of data. And again, you will see this individually unpacked with each principal in their buildings. Before we invite Principal Dibble up, I want you to be, was he like, oh, let me go? Made him flinch. Before I invite Principal Dibble up, I just want you to be thinking about, as principals introduce their data, be thinking about questions that you may have for them. At the end of each of their presentations, I'll come up, wrap it together for us, and then give you an opportunity to ask individual questions. So if you have specific questions for the principal, we'll invite them back up at the end. All right, now I will invite Principal Dibble forward.
I'm going to go a little off your script on you because it's tough for me. I had some, since you brought it up at the beginning, that mental health is a big thing. I wanted to let everyone know that I'm right now in the midst of a complete panic attack. I've been changing some meds, something I've struggled with in the past, but I want you to know that if I look off, I'm struggling. But I want to be here, I want to show this to you, and mental health's important, so I'm showing that we can move forward with this kind of help and assistance from people. So, back there, I was thinking about running out the door, but here I am. So I'm glad you're with me and having me here. So, I'm going to start with a typical tiger. A typical tiger is only tardy 6 times per year. They're gone about 13 times a year for absences or whatnot. They have a 92.7% attendance rate and are not on time to school and classes 91.45% of the time. 87.7% of our students have never been involved in a discipline referral. So before we get to stats and data, I want you to know that we have good students in our buildings. We also have students who struggle with decisions. 50% of our discipline referrals were 28 students, or 2.5% of our population. This 2.45% averaged 118 tardies and missed 34% of their total school periods or days. These are the kids that we spend a majority of our time on, and these are the kids that we're making sure get through our system. With that MCA data, it's not where we want it. If you look at any of these maps, MCA data is a reflection that we need to do more in our schools. However, it's also showing growth. If you take a look at the graduation rate at 88.3%, take a look at the back. We've upticked steadily as we've concentrated on student successes. We've moved some credit recovery into our class. We are concentrating on those students who need our help to get them to graduate. 90%, I believe, is our goal. We're almost there. 100% would be even better, so we're going to work on that. I'll be Darcy tonight. How's that sound? This is the reading, which is quite low. If you take a look, only 38.7% of our students are meeting or exceeding expectations. However, if you take a look at reading in the 8th grade, it was 32.7%, and reading in the 10th grade was 44.9%. We're showing growth, which I believe is due to the methods we use to teach our students and the way we support our students. So if we're going to look at growth, which isn't on the slide, I think that's an important way to look at it. Math is our next one. We jump up to that, or jump down to that 27%, but 8th grade is at 24.4, 10th or 11th grade is at 31.9 for a 7-point gain from 8th grade to 11th grade. So we're growing as a student body. Science, 22.9% total, or 22.9% in 8th to 24% in 10th. Science is pretty new, and it may be reflecting a little bit of the lack of science we had for decades in our schools. Now we have a priority on science, and we're going to see these numbers come up as we move forward. Here's the one that I added. I asked permission to add. We missed our goal by 0.3%. In terms of not making goals, we're pretty happy with a 0.3% failure rate. The ACT is one of the tests that make the most sense for us because the MCA, being a non-required test, is tough. We had a little over 75% participate this year, which is way up from anywhere we've been. What we don't see is that I watched students walk out of those tests in 3 minutes or less last year. If you can perform exceedingly well in 3 minutes, you don't really need school. The point is the MCAs aren't attached to a lot, and the only thing we have to give our kids is that this taking your serious time in this test will help us improve instruction. I'm not sure 8th, 10th, and 11th graders really feel for us there. And so we do look at strand data in the MCA to find out where we can improve. But the ACT are kids who are taking a high-stakes test to try to succeed. So we like to dig into this one to find out where our gaps are for sure. So the 23 is considered college readiness. We went from 24.8% in 23 to the 34.7% for 2024, which for us is exciting and shows that we're doing the right things to help our students succeed. To focus on our next steps, we want to continue to focus on Tier 1 instruction, with which is all classroom instruction, Tier 1. I don't know how MTSS educated we are yet, but we'll get there. There's a lot of good multi-tiered system of supports going on. Tier 1 is effective instruction in the classroom for all students, and a focus on Level 2 of effective teaching in every classroom. We also are going to increase our timely interventions based on those data points in grades 8 through 10. For the first time, we're fully testing our 8th grade, our 9th grade, and some of our 10th grade students using the FAST test, and have a full-time MTSS and reading specialist in our building, so when we see a gap or a student falling behind, we can fix it right now instead of waiting for the MCAs to tell us what we did wrong throughout a year. We are able to make gains immediately. And then we're looking to increase that college readiness to 40% in 2025. So uptick another 2.5% to make it happen. I think one of the big things we're doing well in the school, and I'm hoping they can verify this for me, is it's become a much more positive environment than it was 3-4 years ago. We celebrate success, both for teachers and students. Knock on wood, Sean, how many discipline referrals for physical altercation so far this year? I think it's 1. 1. That's unbelievable. That means we're getting along. Even when we have discrepancies, we're able to work it out. We're able to meet at an individual level and make sure that the first thing going through our head is something peaceful instead of getting back at somebody. I think a lot of that is thanks to our staff, thanks to our students, for promoting positive interventions. One of the things we do are student positives and teacher positives. I know that's a weird sounding word. It's positive with a paw because we're tigers, rawr. So far this year, we've had over 70 student positives and over 30 staff positives given. And so to end my presentation tonight, because of all the hard work you do, and we didn't focus a lot on the School Board Recognition Month, I have a positive for each of you.
Yeah, thank you.
And by the way, I'm feeling much better now, so thanks for putting up with letting me work through my my fun stuff as well. So I'm heading back now, right? Questions later. All right. I think Tyler's up. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate being here.
As Principal Johnson's making his way up, just as a reminder, I think it was well said, just around the MCAs being that summative versus the formative, which really gives us information now so we can react and pivot as necessary for each student. So that's exciting to hear at the high school and walk that backward down into our elementaries. And you'll hear from Principal Johnson.
Well, I do not have positives for the board members, so I will just say that right up front. But looking at our data, and I will echo what Principal Dibble said as well, is just the overall climate as well. I think when we came out of COVID, there was just a lot of relearning of just different social skills. And so I think the overall climate of just even Southwest in itself too has gotten better because again, we are focusing in on that as well. So taking a look at our data here over the years, and I believe this one is reading, our reading. So our MCA scores on the left side there have stayed fairly stagnant or the same throughout each year. There's still definitely work to be done there, and as you'll see as one of our strategies, I'm very excited for what we're doing this year to help improve some of those scores. And then our math scores, again, the far left from 2021, and then the far right 2024, last year as well. So we do the FAST test here, both 6th and 7th grade, and so as Director Franks pointed out, fall is on the left side, winter in the middle, and then spring on the right side. So as you can see, the left side, this is both 6th and 7th grade. Started out at 46% in that low risk to college pathways, and then we ended at 42% in the spring. Math started at 59%, had a little dip in the winter, and then regained back at 59% in the spring then as well. So some of the strategies that we are doing here at Southwest, like I said, this year we are doing something new called Reading Academy. So we have 5 reading intervention teachers in a program that's opposite of our lunch period. Most students are in what's called learner support. They're based on the FAST scores. Those students that are in the some risk category get placed into Reading Academy. So we have 4 8-week-long Reading Academies, and so the students that are placed in the Reading Academy will go to their Reading Academy class for 8 weeks, and they're grouped based on their needs. So if I'm a teacher in one of those Reading Academy classes, I will have about 5 students that all need the same needs, and then they are being progress monitored every week, and then at the end of 8 weeks are assessed again, and if they are at grade level and at low risk to college pathways, then they go back to their learner support, and we pull in new students during that time. Another thing that happened this year is our new schedule. So in years past, most of our classes were 43 minutes, except the one that was opposite of lunch was 52 minutes. So that was an 8-period day. This year we've gone to a 7-period day, which has allowed the class time to be more consistent, anywhere from 51 to 53 minutes now. And then another thing that's very exciting is that we are doing more team talk classes with our students receiving special ed services and also EL services as well. So they are in the class, and there is the classroom teacher, in addition, a special education teacher or EL teacher in the classroom in both reading and math classes.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm excited to share the data with you. You'll see that there's a lot of room for improvement, but we can look at it the other way, that there's a lot of optimism for what's going to come. So looking first at our reading MCA data, you can see in the gray, that's where we really want that a lot less, and the very blue on top to grow quite a bit more. We have some great things in place to make that happen this next school year. Moving on to math, you can see the same thing. We need to lessen that does not meet and get more of the exceeds. But science, we're excited, like Principal Dibble talked about, with Amplify being our science and the fidelity that our teachers have to the curriculum. We're seeing some great growth in science. The students are very excited. So we like to see that. Looking at our E-reading for K1 and our A reading for 2-5, you see on the top is what we want to grow, on the bottom we want less. Our goal for our school for Halverson, we want to increase our A reading. So from last spring, if you see the row on the very right side, for the spring, we were at 36%, and we'd like to get that up to 40% by the end of the school year. Looking at math, K1, some great growth, as well as A math. What are we going to do to make this happen? So we I already spoke about the goal. We're going to go from 36% to the growth of 40% on that A reading. And what's really going to help that is we have a new curriculum called Wit and Wisdom. It's very rigorous, which is wonderful. There's wonderful ways to scaffold. Today, the teachers had a great learning day to learn different ways that they can make this successful in their classrooms and successful for all students. So we're very excited about that. Focusing on that really strong Tier 1 instruction in each classroom, and what can we do to ensure that every student succeeds. In addition, we really need to focus on the social emotional needs of our students. So fortunately, we have Teach to Heal, which has been implemented in the schools. Last year, we added the dean position, and now this year we have our engagement specialist. So we're really able to meet the social emotional needs of each of our students so they can focus on academics when they're in the classroom. With Wit and Wisdom, we're also really using the push-in model for our multi-language teachers, as well as our special education learning center teachers, pushing into the classroom to meet. So the students are
there to receive that strong Tier 1 instruction, and their needs can be met, and things can be scaffolded, as well as all standards be addressed. We're looking and focusing on effective PLCs and really bringing the data back to the teachers and letting that data drive the instruction so we can focus on what students need in the classroom. And then in addition, coming out of our MTSS work, our multi-tiered systems of support, we need to increase caregiver involvement. So we're really focusing on different ways to have family engagement increase at Halverson Elementary as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. If you know anything about me, you know data is one of my most favorite things to talk about in the whole wide world. People laugh and they think that's funny. But we are gonna jump right into obviously our literacy data, and this is our MCA literacy data. So similar to sentiments of my colleagues, we hope to decrease the gray and increase the blue, green, and light blue. But this is where we are currently sitting. And this is obviously over again from 2021 to 2024. So this is our math data. And again, MCA is only taken in elementary schools by students in grades 3 through 5. Just, I don't know if that context has been mentioned or not, but we are currently sitting right here. And then we have science, and this is only taken by 5th graders, although our science curriculum goes obviously K-5 in elementary spaces, but it continues on in our middle school and high school spaces. But specifically, as far as MCAs are concerned, it is only taken by our 5th grade students. So with the implementation of Amplify, recently, was that 2022 we implemented, 2021? Yeah, so that has been a success for our students and helping to increase scores. Okay, so something that I wanted to make sure I mentioned about e-reading. E-reading is a composite score of multiple subtests for our early learners. So when they're, this little fly here, when they are assessing, for instance, a kindergartner might get word segmenting, letter sounds, and all of that stuff. So the data that's represented on the screen right now is actually a composite score of all of those mini subtests for those e-reading K and 1. A-reading, again, is an adaptive test, so there are also little different components to that, but I wanted you to know that that's how the snapshot works. But a celebratory point for Hawthorne was that we increased, and I think this is attributed to some of the professional development that our teachers have been through, from 27% to 30% last year in that test. And then this is eMath. Similar to e-reading, it is composed of multiple little subtests that develop a composite score. So not as celebratory there for our eMath, and then our A-Math, the growth was stagnant. So next step for us, this was a collective decision, and just so you have some context too for how building goals are established, we go spring to spring. So spring 2024 to spring 2025 was how this goal was established, and that was established during our professional learn community by the collective team on where we wanted to go. So our team focused, you get to choose typically which assessment modality you'd like to use. Our team chose FAST. You could choose MCAs. And then we looked at that spring score and determined how much we wanted to increase that percentage, and our team chose 3%. So increasing our proficiency rates on FAST from 33.2 to 36.2 by spring 2025 is our goal. How we are going to get there is this focus on accelerated learning. So if any of you have had any opportunity to dig into the New Teacher Project, TNTP, and the Opportunity Myth, they talk all about accelerated learning. It's I guess not a light read, but if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that, a lot of good work comes out of that for accelerated learning. But in focusing on acceleration, not necessarily remediation, we're closing gaps quickly and keeping students at grade level. So that is the whole, it's all about the opportunity gaps that we're not creating when we spend so much time in remediation. When we think students perpetually have a gap here and a gap here, we're really, as the adults managing the space, creating that gap when we don't give them opportunities to access grade level content. So that is some work that the elementary teams are focusing on. We're also focusing on, obviously, effective Tier 1 instruction using our instructional model. So we're implementing those high impact strategies that we know are going to make movement for students. How we will get there continued, data-driven PLCs. So one of the things that your elementary teachers engaged in today was lesson study kind of things with Wit and Wisdom and how they're going to use PLCs to mobilize that work and develop and effectively implement lessons as it relates to that curriculum. Our teachers are also going through letters, so we're really focusing on science-based literacy and leaning on the research with that. And then we have our trauma responsive teaching in which we're mobilizing Teach to Heal. So we know that dysregulated brains can't access learning anyways, so we're really focusing on that regulation first. And as Kim spoke to, we have obviously deans and engagement specialists in place so that learning can continue to happen in those spaces and those social emotional learning needs are getting addressed. I think that's it.
Thanks for having me tonight. I brought my cheat sheet with because I realized last time I presented that board's a long ways away, or I'm getting older, one of the two. So I get the opportunity to present about the amazing things that are happening at Lakeview. Data is one of the pieces that's getting presented tonight, but I want to just say I get the opportunity to lead some pretty amazing staff that work really hard to get to what we see on the screen, and we know we have opportunities to continue to grow, but just giving them kudos, and there's some celebrations that I'll highlight tonight as we move. All right, see, small. So starting with reading, you can see kind of like my colleagues have already highlighted, we have that opportunity to continue to grow. We are in a good spot, but I'll talk to a few of the areas where we're looking at target specifically with our reading intervention work that we are completing. Math, similar at that about 50-ish%, I think 53.8, and have stayed that way for the past few years. So really looking at trying to move that needle forward, and especially with some of the focuses that we'll talk about here in a minute. And then science, Marie highlighted it, but as a former 5th grade teacher, science is taken at that 5th grade level, but the foundational work happens K4, and really ensuring that that work is happening and committing to that, because when that is missed, those skills are tested in that 5th grade level, but may have been taught at various levels along the way. So science, yes, it gets tested in 5th grade, but it's really important to highlight that the work happens along the journey of their educational career in elementary school as well. So we have our e-reading and A-reading. Some nice growth and talking about the composite of those smaller tests and some of those skills built in the K1 area along the way. And starting at 53% and moving just slightly down to that 50%. Our goal is focused in reading this year with increasing that to 52% as our target goal. Here's an area I'd like to celebrate. Our staff took a commitment during our PLC work to focus on math, and each of our PLCs was focused on that cycle work, looking at data, how do we meet students' needs, what scaffolds need to be in place, and you can see a tremendous growth on both areas here, and I think that speaks to that commitment to leveraging the tool of PLCs and that commitment of Wednesday mornings and how much impact that can have, and seeing that impact then on our student learning as well is huge. So that I wanted to celebrate with you tonight. All right, so some of our next pieces, Marie stole my thunder with talking about accelerated learning already, but really that idea of working to not slow students down, but hold that bar high while we still provide those scaffolds and in-time support. And a lot of that is that ongoing data that we are collecting, not just relying on our screener and MCAs at the end, but that ongoing data that provides us the understanding of what we need to do to meet their needs so they can reach that high bar that we have set for them. And that also leans into just our focus. So last year at Lakeview, we put a tremendous amount of effort designing perfect groups where we could intervene for students within our reading instruction. We saw, and I showed you the data, that just wasn't working. So instead of admiring the fly that's on my face, the problem that is, it's just coming around, admiring that, knowing we wanted to see bigger growth there, we're doing a little something different. So we're pushing a lot of our support into that K1-2 area this year and using and leveraging professional collaboration within our learning communities and beyond to really focus on how can we support and meet all of our students' needs. 3, 4, 5 will look a little different this year, but knowing we wanted to try something different to hopefully achieve different results. And then the last slide, For me, being new last year, HRS is a large a framework, and not having experienced that up to this point, there's a lot of learning involved last year and into this year for myself personally. And this year, really excited at Lakeview being able to continue that work. So our leadership team has taken over a lot of the HRS level 1 work, so really going back and collecting that quick data to ensure we have the right things still in place and they're working for us, and recalibrating as needed. And then for me as an instructional leader, being able to be present in classrooms and being able to provide that feedback either in the evaluation cycle or as well as in our walkthroughs. And huge shout out to both Principal Johnson and Dibble. They have been really, really helpful amongst my colleagues of being able just to support me with many questions around our instructional framework, and Executive Director Franks as well. So it's been a good learning piece, but excited to move that work forward at Lakeview this year. And the second piece there is that the lessons within our second step curriculum, continue to implement those, supporting our social emotional growth, but then Teach to Heal, providing that framework for us to guide both our understanding as adults, how we serve kids, and then being able to support them with that ongoing professional learning throughout the year as well. And just highlighting 3 positions that I think really have had an impact at Lakeview specifically, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree across the board. They mentioned engagement specialists, so that in-the-moment support for our students when they're showing those needs. Our deans have been a huge support as well, providing that supportive skill building for our students in those moments. Chris talked about knowing that we can restore some of those aspects, and our deans play an integral part of allowing us to do that and having the bandwidth to do that as leaders in our building. And then our due process lead, highlighting that specific role, that has been incredibly helpful for students that have IEPs. We have that incredible resource to support our case managers as we are looking at how we build plans that are going to help support our students' needs, and having that due process lead has been a huge support. And you've heard PLCs mentioned over and over again, and just highlighting again, I feel that's one of the areas that we really tweaked, and you saw the growth within our math within FAST. And then Wit and Wisdom, it's been fun to be in classrooms and see things. I was talking with a 3rd grade teacher this week, and I said, when would you have ever been writing full paragraphs by the 4th week of school? And I think Wit and Wisdom has really pushed us forward into having the support needed with professional learning on it, but seeing just some really cool things that are happening with our students, and I think pushing us forward and challenging them in ways that our students have risen to the occasion. So I think that's been really neat to be in classrooms and see that happening as well. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for letting me come and talk to you about Sibley. Thank you. So as, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here in all of these forms as well, just because they've all been the same across the board. Obviously, we've got some places that we need to focus our attention on, and reading at Sibley is definitely one of them. Definitely need to grow that green and blue area. And same with our math. Our math we need to grow as well. It looks like this last 2024 here, we really struggled in the area of math. In our e-reading, K1, we had some growth here, and I think we've done a lot of focus in our K1 in the last couple of years. So I think that's part of this growth from 37 to 47%. In A-reading, the 2nd through 5th grade, we've also had a little bit of growth here too. We're doing some things right, and I think it's our focus to continue to do that, and hopefully we get some more growth there. In math, we've kind of stayed stagnant throughout. We need to do some more focus there with our math, and I think part of what my colleagues have talked about with our accelerated learning, I think that's going to be have a big impact here with our math. We are focusing on reading as well, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a lot of math discussions. So one of our goals is to increase from 41% to 43% for our reading, but we will still have a lot of conversation around our math as well. We do a lot of professional development around accelerated learning. I've been dripping it in last year with a lot of the staff at Sibley, and we will continue to dig a little deeper into that this year. We've also done a lot, especially at Sibley with Teach to Heal, and we've been teaching the staff a lot about the life-based crisis intervention. This addresses a lot of the behaviors in all different tiers through our multi-tiered system of support. It gives the teachers a lot of tools they can use in the classroom. It also provides proactive, consistent strategies for de-escalation in the classroom. So before it becomes a big problem, they have some tools that they can use. One of the big tools that we use right now is we have calming corners in the classrooms. They have lots of tools that they're taught to use in the classrooms, and it's been a big help. I think we just have those supportive relationships with all of our kids, with all of our staff. Just building those relationships, I think, is what helps our kids. If their brains aren't ready to learn, that's where we need to meet them.
All right, I'd like to thank all the principals for coming up and sharing their data slides and their next steps. Before we open up for questions, I'm going to take us back to our core values, which are also part of our strategic plan. They're not lying about the fly. Good, really? Okay, so bringing us back to our core values, I really took time today to look at each of those principal slides and pick out key words that stood out to me in their next steps. And where do those next steps tie into our core values as a district? And so the words that you see highlighted in white are those key pieces that really stood out. You heard professional development a number of times this evening from our building instructional leaders. You heard the words accelerated learning multiple times, focusing on our Tier 1 instruction, having high expectations academically for our students. You also heard the word instructional model numerous times this evening, keeping us grounded in the work of the instructional model and the design areas that we know are high-impact strategies for our staff and students. Other pieces in that area of excellence, that high standards in maximizing our resources, words that stood out to me were co-teaching, the work that we're doing for our multi-language learners and students with individual education plans. College readiness stood out to me as we look through the components of the high school plan. And then intervention tier 2. We know that with the READ Act and the literacy requirements, there's a different level of requirement for intervention. And you heard our buildings highlight some of the ways that they are choosing to stay with Tier 1 accelerated learning, but then how we're responding to students that have Tier 2 needs as well. Another piece that stood out to me was the idea of inclusivity and promoting an environment where all students belong and are supported. And two areas there, again, I highlighted co-teaching again, but then reducing the amount of pull-out, that students really do have access to universal access to Tier 1 instruction. And I think that's really important to highlight. Those two pieces really come together in high standards for our students. We talk about what are some of the next steps. In each of the principal slides, they highlighted a goal. Those goals that they highlighted tonight are one of many that will become part of our school-wide action plans or continuous improvement plan. The goal that they highlighted is what is tied to their ATPPS goal. That's the Alternative Teacher Performance Pay System. That's only one part of the whole. So as we think about that, one of the things that we will be doing this year is really digging in to a comprehensive needs assessment. From that comprehensive needs assessment, it will inform what our school-wide action plans and continuous improvement plans look like. This graphic just really lays out those questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we create those plans. All data should lead to questions. Those questions should lead to plans. And so these are the different questions that we'll be digging into. Another piece, I was taking notes as the principals were presenting, but another piece of that comprehensive needs assessment and the data that we looked at, I appreciate the principals highlighting that MCAs is just being a snapshot one time a year. But the FAST, the formative assessment, it really gives us benchmark data throughout the year. You saw those 3 data points being highlighted. Another important thing to think about with our FAST data is our FAST data provides us with a variety of norms. So we can compare it across national norms, but we also compare it against local norms. So as we're looking at answering these 3 questions, our FAST data allows us to break apart the data by class. So what does it look like in Director Hoffman's class versus Director Score's class? It allows us to break it down by grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, by grade. It allows us to break down by school and by district. So we really have a more comprehensive set of data with our FAST assessments than we do with our MCAs. And you also heard the principals highlight, then that gives us data that we're able to respond to more immediately. Yep, 3 times a year, I highlighted that. So I'd really like to open that up to questions for any of the principals you'd like to ask a specific question to. They can come forward again and answer your questions as you have them.
Just one additional piece. As we think about the FAST Bridge, it is, once you get that assessment, formative assessment, then you can actually, if a student needs additional support, you can run a diagnostic. And the diagnostic actually identifies the skills needed that the student needs additional support. We know that the MCA, everyone enters at the same place, and we cannot wait, and it's called plan and hope. Hope not being that strategy. We can't wait, plan, and hope the students are successful. We need to know immediately and how we're going to pivot to ensure we meet the needs of individual students and monitor their growth. And growth is about every student entering in, keeping those high expectations, having that accelerated learning and moving each student forward. So thank you, building leaders. Questions?
First of all, I'm glad to see other data beyond MCA data, because it tells a different picture. I just have a question on MCA. I'm glad to hear there's more students opting in to take MCAs at the high school, but I've always felt like the MCA data at the high school level lacks validity due to the high percentage of opting out. Is that a fair way to look at that, or do we have any value out of MCA? There you go.
I was like, hearing.
I don't like it. I mean, it's more than just not liking it. It's just we only have, a finite amount of time to research and to look at test data. And it's the MCAs just because, when watching the process in which it goes down and the opt-outs that we have, it's not where we want to spend a lot of time researching how to get better. You remember back in the day, the MCAs were tied to, there was the tests to graduate from high school. There was a reason for those students to sit in that classroom and get them done, and those reasons just aren't there anymore.
Can I ask a couple more? Chris, I'm happy to hear about the atmosphere being more positive. I want to ask Carly and Max, because you're highly engaged students in our high school. Would you agree that the atmosphere is more positive this year compared to maybe last year or the previous year? What's your take?
Oh, sorry. Is it on? Okay. I personally do feel that it has been very positive. That might just because I'm being around the people who are very positive about our school. But at the same time, I've seen less negativity from people that I do not know. As they said, there has been only one suspension due to physical altercations, and I feel like that has been way higher in the past years. So it's not only positive towards the school, but other students as well. You have anything?
I would agree that it's been more positive. I think a lot of it, from my perspective, I've seen it, a lot of it comes from like how the older students are acting because the younger students are gonna follow that. And I think, not to like hype up my class or anything, but I think my class has done a really good job of that so far this year. And I think that's really had a positive impact on how like all the younger grades see our school and what they can do with it. So I think we've been really focused on that, especially after learning from some of the mistakes previous classes have made. We've definitely been focused on trying to, you know, keep that positivity going, and hopefully future classes will follow.
Good.
Something more to add.
Yeah.
Participation, like in activities and stuff, I feel like has also increased the positivity at our school, not only going to games, but also participating in athletics and clubs. I feel like that has gone way up and maybe impacted the way students feel about our school.
Heard that from the athletic director last meeting. And then with the positive atmosphere, it's obviously going to improve teaching and learning too. So it's all tied together. Another question I have is that to me, the data is showing us that we have statistically significant improvement in some schools when it comes to math and science. I've heard that over the years. This particular school has done things to improve in a significant way student performance in science. As a district, when we know that, how are we tapping into, to me, it's tapping into the excellence at a particular school. How do we tap into that excellence when we're seeing statistically significant improvement?
That's an excellent question, Director Schindler. That's actually one of the things that we will be working through this year is how to do exactly what you just said. Superintendent Wagner and I also discussed what do our team structures look like so that we're supporting that work. Looking with our district leadership team, unpacking our data at that level and digging into what do we look like as a district. Now we'll taper down to our principal instructional teams, digging into more site-level data at our principal level, and then from there, tapering down into our building leadership teams, where we can break down our data even more detailed in those areas that I was discussing, by class, by grade, by building. As we do some of that mining of our data, working collaboratively with our instructional leaders, our building principals, but also our instructional coaches and our MTSS literacy coaches. You highlighted that importance of math and science, how we've seen some nice increases in that area. While there's a difference in a have to with the READ Act, we get to now do that work also and really dig into how are we responding to our data and really identifying those high impact strategies that are working. With the adoption of a curricular resource, you know that we're going to be looking at that a little bit differently than we have in the past as well. I think we have been craving an instructional resource that will support our literacy instruction.
I would add as a follow-up, it's building that coherence across our elementary schools and creating that foundation. And then I also mentioned earlier about the learning walks and going into the classrooms to look at the excellence in the teaching strategies and working to replicate that and support our teachers. We know that the number one lever for student achievement are the teachers. So really ensuring and providing support for the teachers. And today's a perfect example, giving them that professional learning to build that coherence across the elementaries.
All right, my questions are probably more for Tanya than any specific principal.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay. First, I was wondering if we could get these slides sent to us so we could look at them a little more deeper and slower. Then I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more how the FAST test data works, and it sounds like that's more accurate than using the MCAs. I'm just curious, kind of related to what Gary brought up, do any of the students get to opt out of that? Or do they take it more seriously than the MCAs? How does that?
There's not an opt-out on the FAST test in the same way that the state allows for opt-outs at the MCA level. They are part of the work that we do every day. It's a formative assessment that really guides instruction in our classrooms. So the FAST assessment is given in the fall within the first couple weeks of school. As Superintendent Wagner mentioned, at the 2nd through 10th grade level, it's an adaptive assessment. So as students are answering questions correctly, it progresses with the way they're answering their questions. If they're answering incorrectly, it adapts again to how they're performing. So that's kind of how adaptive is met. So I'm a 5th grade student who is meeting or exceeding those grade level standards or expectations. My assessment will adapt to more difficult questions. Same a different 5th grade student who is struggling to meet those proficiency levels will receive questions tapered down to their level, and it will adjust accordingly. And then those assessments are, like I said, normed at the national level, and then we also have the ability to look at them locally as well. 3 times a year, so that happens within the first couple weeks of the school year. It will happen again before winter break, so about the second or third week of December, and then we finalize that 3rd spring assessment in May. Let's see, what other questions can I answer around the assessment?
Do the students, I mean, I think Principal Dibble mentioned they might be done in 3 minutes. Are they able to kind of goof off and not take it seriously, or are they more engaged in this?
You know, I think one thing, kudos to our teachers, is that our teachers really do share with our students the importance of why they should take it seriously. And I think we get better performance with our FAST assessments than we do with our MCA assessments. It really does help us guide our instruction better.
It is, okay.
And there's a result. If you take this test super fast, you could get pulled out of an elective for intense reading intervention. And we explain that, if we want to help those who need help. And so it's taken a little more seriously when you know there's going to be an immediate reaction to how you perform on the test. So I think the results are more meaningful.
Okay, thank you.
No, and in the elementary, like Ron kind of mentioned, there are diagnostic pieces that a score, we almost consider it to be, because it's a universal screener, it's like a flag. Like, hey, you know what? Pay a little bit closer attention to my needs. You might need to do some further diagnosing so that you can address my needs. But that universal screener at that 3 times a year helps us to do that. And then in between, there's progress monitoring tools for us to monitor the progress based on the diagnostic assessment that maybe we did. But FAST codes, and this wasn't necessarily in the data, as like a double exclamation mark, single exclamation mark, and that's the red flag basically saying, I need some extra support. Please look at me a little bit closer so that you can diagnose what that extra support is, and then we can put those plans in place.
Okay, thank you.
That kind of answered my question, because we saw a lot of the schools were in the second assessment were maybe just a little bit lower than the first, and then we saw pretty much in almost all of them an increase. So that's what you're talking about, that diagnostics. Okay. And the only other question that I had, you've used college readiness as a benchmark. Are there metrics that come with that, like benchmarks, if you will, or is that just language? Okay.
There are. So when we were looking at, I'm just going to bring back one schools. Okay, so when you are looking at those color variations, you've heard some different language, and you mentioned the college readiness or the college pathway. So our high-risk students are those that are below the 15th percentile. The some risk students are the students that are the 15th to 39th percentile, and then the low risk are 40th to 99th. But 40th to 99th is really large. So then they further break it down to what's called an advanced pathway. That's your 71 to 99. So anything above the 70th percentile is really that college pathway window.
And I would also offer then, that is where we even continue to look at extensions for the students that may be in that area as well, as we look at the diagnostics and supports, but also the continued extensions for the students that may be in that upper level as well.
I left here a couple meetings ago with the new reading curriculum, thinking it's going to take years before we know if it's impacting student learning, but I'm getting a sense now that this FAST assessment could give us some means to assess if that reading curriculum has made an impact on student learning. Is that a fair way to look at this?
I'm going to say yes and.
Okay.
Because, yes, our FAST assessments provide us that benchmark data throughout the year where we can regularly monitor and adjust. And will be with a implementation of a new curriculum, and that will be our K-5 Wit and Wisdom this year. We're looking at 6-7 next, but that is considered really 3 years to full implementation. But with those concentrated professional development times and allowing our teachers time to really dig into those and how to build the module and lesson studies is part of the work that they did today. But really, they say 3 years for full implementation. You might be going to say what I'm going to say. Additionally, outside of the curriculum is the literacy training. And so we are on track to get all of our Phase 1 educators trained in letters. So that's all of that foundational skills work. Having our teachers equipped. Yes, we've had a foundational skills curriculum, but really understanding the pedagogy behind it is really important. And so we're on track to have all of our Phase 1 educators trained by June 30th of 2025. And then Phase 2 is having all of our secondary teachers responsible for language arts instruction trained by June of 2027. We're on track for that as well. We desire to be ahead of schedule, but we're waiting on some of MDE's timelines. So we were really at a place where we could have gotten that done this year if we had the approved trainings from MDE. So we're in a holding pattern right now until MDE releases that in January for a February registration. Was that what you were going to say, Superintendent Wagner? Okay.
Yeah, and you somewhat allayed my suspicions when you responded to the issue of college preparation as a criteria, as a measuring stick to the extent to which we are succeeding in educating our students. And that's been a red flag for me for a long time. I mean, I think I reached this conclusion in 1968, which was the first year I stepped into a classroom as a teacher, that not all students should be expected to excel in all of those areas that are necessary to be a successful college student. Where is our measuring device that measures how ready our students are for trades? And I'm a huge fan of liberal arts. I'm a huge fan of a liberal arts education in a college. And I think all welders should have an appreciation of Shakespeare. But on the other hand, I'm a little reluctant to rely too heavily on measuring devices that are supposed to measure a student's readiness for college. And I'm also, and Chris, you allayed my suspicion somewhat about the validity of the MCA tests. More students are taking it, which might be a bad thing, because I too share your suspicion that some students would race through there and put C for an answer to everything and be done in 3 minutes. And you have suggested that there are some devices that will cause students to be reluctant to do that way, but I'm still not all that sold on the validity of the MCA tests. So that's it.
I got a question for Chris, unrelated to all this, I've seen enough data tonight. Okay. How is the open campus going at noon?
Senior privilege. Really well. They've signed out every day. What are you hearing? Carly asked a question not too long ago. She brought some to my attention that there's maybe a couple people cheating it, but people are always going to find a way, Bruce. But from what I've seen, I've heard no issues from teachers of students coming back on time. There was one parent who called in and said, "Where's my kid supposed to be right now?" And we said, "Government." And they said, "Well, she's on my couch." Okay, that's, she probably should be in government. And so the mom reached out and we solved that, problem through them. But they've been respectful. If they do go for food, they're not bringing it back into the cafeteria, which is one of the rules. They'll eat in the car or on the outside tables. So I would call it so far successful.
The only thing I will add is I think we should celebrate the graduation rate. There are a lot of districts not in that same situation right now after COVID. They continue to see the decline or the COVID effect, as people will say. And I really like that we're starting to see that uptick. So great work.
And I will just give you that, the addition of that credit recovery program into our school day post-COVID has been huge. And the days like this, I cannot thank you guys enough for giving our teachers a chance to work together. I know seat time's an issue we're going to talk about all the time, but this 8 hours of non-seat time for students today, watching a staff of 85 people work so collaboratively. We started with a blank document today, and as of right now, I have 60 instructional cycles or curriculum maps on a document showing exactly what their plan is for the rest of the year. It's not filled out perfect, but it's a huge step in making sure that we can make plans that we know all kids can follow. So I thank you guys for that.
Thank you all so much for your reports. We've appreciated the snapshot and look forward to having the slides. Our next presentation is from Paul Durbon on effective, efficient operations, the approval and adoption of the proposed 2024 pay 2025 levy at maximum. This is an action item.
Good evening, Chair Nelson, School Board Director, Superintendent Wagner. Thank you. I'm here to present the 24 Pay 25 levy. Some of you are familiar with this process, but my goal is to explain it in as simplest terms as possible. It's a very complicated process, the levy. September 8th this year, the Department of Education started to release our levy limitation and certification report. And through a process, we go through this 39-page report and comb through it for errors or adjustments, and we monitor it closely. From our office, Executive Director Walsh and myself, it's a fairly exciting time. Others may look at this and be a little intimidated. By today, September 30th, state statute, we need to send our approval of our preliminary levy to the county auditors. And we will be back in December for our final levy presentation after our Truth in Taxation meeting. So 24, pay 25 means that we certify the levy in 24,
taxes are paid in '25, and we realize that revenue in 2025-26 school year. As I noted, this report is updated daily from September 8th through September 30th. And the numbers in this presentation were from, I believe, Thursday's last week. We did check the report Friday and this morning, and the levy did not seem to change over that time. So it should be accurate information in front of you. As noted, I'm going to try to simplify this report and pull out the important pieces of information for school board consideration this evening. So in our general fund, and also another document that you have in front of you is a summary of this report. Believe it or not, that is a simplified version of the levy limitation and certification report. We should be able to locate and find the data presented in the presentation this evening in that report, and certainly we're available for questions following if needed. So in the general fund, the operating referendum is adjusted based on an inflationary rate set by the Department of Education. That rate is 2.43%. Referendum adjustments decreased in this year's run of the levy by $232,517. That is mostly due to a large adjustment from last year, or that we had in last year's levy that we do not have in this year's levy. We're seeing we're projecting a decline in enrollment, and we look at enrollment through an enrollment projection model that year to year is fairly accurate. However, there are adjustments made to levies based on actual enrollment versus our projected enrollment, and we see that in future years. Also, one other important item to note in the general fund portion of the levy is our long-term facilities maintenance is seeing a decrease of $362,130. And if you remember, in February, we sold bonds for our facilities maintenance or long-term facility maintenance projects for new boilers at Southwest Middle School, Lakeview Elementary, and HVAC unit at Albert Lee High School. And the reason we're seeing a reduction in the general fund here is that will be realized in our debt service fund, and we'll mention that here shortly. Overall, in the general fund, just to note, we're seeing a difference from 23 pay 24 to 24 pay 25 of $651,572. So we're seeing a levy decrease in the general fund. And those highlights we just talked through are explaining that decrease. In the community education fund, very minor. We're seeing a $5,496 levy increase. And it's a very minor change, but mostly due to early childhood family education increase in the levy. For the debt service, so the debt service here, what we levy for here is set by the principal and interest for payments in fiscal year 26, so 25-26 school year, plus 5%. And this increase includes that shift from our LTFM to debt service, so the bond payments that we have for the mechanical projects we mentioned here moments ago. This graph here depicts school property tax history on a $100,000 residential home. Now, these are estimates. They're provided to us by financial advisors. And we know $100,000 isn't an actual average home value anymore. At one point it was, and it was a nice graph to have for that reason. But since we've started using $100,000 to track this, it's nice to be consistent and see this data from year to year. $100,000, for whatever reason, is just a nice benchmark as well. So it gives us some context on how the taxes may be impacted on a home in our community. And again, these are estimates, and based on individual property values, how those fluctuate, that may impact the taxes that each home or property may realize as well. One thing I want to point out with this graph is that from fiscal year 24, or from 2024 to 25, an estimated residential home may see a decrease of about 11.8% in their taxes from the school side of their taxes. This next slide is our school building bond agricultural credit. It's worth mentioning. In the years 21, 22, and 23, we saw that credit increase. So this reduces the voter-approved bond taxes on ag land that exceeds the allowable amount for a house, garage, and 1 acre of land. So this will continue to be a tax credit of 70% for those landowners. And to circle back to that, so that is voter-approved bond taxes. So a good example of that would be our Hammer project when we approved the bond for that large project. All right, so this slide is kind of the guts of the presentation here. So just a summary of what we've talked through. There's 3 columns that you'll really see here. The 23 pay 24 levy, that's last year's levy that we had approved. Our 24 pay 25 levy is the middle column, and then you'll see the difference in that percentage change in the right 2 columns. So in our general fund, we're seeing a decrease of $651,572. That's a minus 9.24% from last year to this year. And community service, $5,496 increase. That's a 3.38% increase. And that debt service, we see that large increase mostly due to that LTFM, long-term facility maintenance payments there for that. So $401,170, that's a 14.18% increase from last year's levy to this year's. Overall, our 24 pay 25 levy, we will see a decrease, which $244,906. It's a negative 2.44% decrease, excuse me, a 2.44% decrease for this year's levy. So in summary, again, the total proposed levy of $9,797,454, and it's a decrease of 2.44%. One item to note is that our tax base is increasing, and that does have an impact on taxes in our community overall. So these percentages aren't dollar for dollar, percent for percent. Depending on how property values change, that may impact your taxes that we all realize. So the referendum market value is increasing 3.91%, and net tax capacity increasing 2%, and that comes from our county auditor. That's where we gather that information. So in conclusion, this evening we ask that the board approves the certification of the proposed 24 pay 25 levy for the maximum levy authority. And for your consideration, we approve the preliminary levy this evening, and we come back for the final levy at a specific dollar amount in December. So, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. This is an action item. Before we discuss, I would entertain a motion. So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes, Paul, these figures that you're giving us are assuming that we're talking about the maximum levy that, as it is proposed in our resolution. Those figures reflect
Yes,
what the
correct.
result would be with that
As
levy.
presented, that would reflect the maximum levy.
Something other than that, then those figures would be different.
Correct.
Right. And furthermore, I'm assuming that, well, there are a lot of reasons in favor of supporting the maximum levy, but one of them is that in December, or when we visit this again, we can always go down, but if we approve something less than this, we can't go up.
That is correct.
Yes. So it would be imprudent of us to do anything other than, in my opinion, approve the maximum levy.
Angie?
A couple of questions. You mentioned a large adjustment that had come off. What was that from? I don't remember.
So that large adjustment was due to an enrollment adjustment. So a lot of the levy is based off of our projected enrollment.
Okay.
So in a prior year, we had projected an enrollment value, and we made an adjustment in our future year levy. That was in last year's levy. And now in this year's levy, we do not have a large adjustment, so we're seeing a reduction there due to that.
Okay. That might be related to my second question, was I was hoping just for some clarification on the adjusted pupil units. I had noticed, this looks like we have fewer students than the start of last year, but in August at a meeting, it had been reported that we were looking at higher students than last year, and those numbers reported in August were a little bit different than these adjusted pupil units, and I'm just curious if that
Yeah, I can speak to that
can
a
be
little bit.
explained, yeah.
And so I'll try to answer your question the best I can. And what we use is an enrollment projection model. And these numbers here are adjusted pupil units. They're not direct number of students in seats. Another measure we often use is ADM, which is your average daily membership. The APU has for students in grades 7 through 12, a factor of 1.2. So you multiply those students by 1.2. So you might see numbers that don't look like the exact enrollment data that we see here. Our enrollment projection model is, and I mentioned, it's fairly consistent year to year. The data that you heard in August was probably more related to our current enrollment that we're seeing, a little bit better enrollment in the schools. But we also know, and this is what the enrollment projection model takes into consideration, that over the course of a school year, you do lose students either to 15-day drops or they move to a different location. Typically, we see some enrollment decline through the course of a school year. And the beauty of this is that if we are off, we will either see adjustments in the future levy, and we often make adjustments in our budgets accordingly, so.
So just double checking, is our enrollment actually up from last year, even though this shows that it looks like it's down?
Yes, we're still monitoring that. We're up as students, we're on the positive side, but we'll continue to monitor what that looks like. And we are post 15-day drop as well.
Any other questions? One comment I might make too, that it's still the case that if we levy at the max, we open ourselves up for additional funding opportunities through the state.
In terms of aid?
Yes.
So that's a good question. And every formula is different and confusing at times, but oftentimes aid is attached to what we levy. And that can be the case, yes, that the aid is tied to the levy. So, and not for every piece of the levy that we're looking at, but for a lot of it, yes.
We will forego the amount that we would get from the state as aid.
A portion.
Proportion,
And for
yeah.
each, so a lot of the funds that are within the levy are restricted funds. And each formula is very unique. And so the aid levy values are not always dollar for dollar or directly proportional, but there is a significant amount of aid that is tied to the levy. And if we under levy, we will forgo that aid portion as well.
Thank you, Paul. Any other questions before we vote? All right. All those in favor of paying the proposed 2024 pay 2025 levy at maximum signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. And wanted to just welcome Carly and Max. Thank you for taking this on.
All right, 9.2, policies for review. This is an action item presented by Director Mattson and Director Franks.
Good evening, Chair Nelson, School Board Directors, and Superintendent Wagner. So for this evening, we would like to present to you a number of policies for review and action regarding those policies that had revisions due to the 2024 legislature session. We did hold a policy review committee on September 3rd, and we do have the list of policies that we reviewed at that committee meeting. And I do also want to add that we did an annual review of policy 722 and policy 806, which is the public data requests and crisis management policy. No revisions in those two policies. So first, starting with policy 102 is our equal educational opportunity, really adjusting that general statement of policy to reflect change in the Minnesota Human Rights Act, recognizing that discrimination could be based on one or more protected characteristics. So again, changing that revision to include one or more of the following. The second revision would be under policy 413, harassment and violence. And really, this is defining and amending the familial status. So that amendment now includes parents and guardians who have custody or written permission from the parents to care for a child. And then it also includes any person who may need assistance who resides with that person to have those familial rights as well. So that is included under definitions in policy 413. What we see under policy 418, there has been added protections to any persons who is registered in the Minnesota Patient Registry Program. So under exceptions, that does add a full paragraph regarding that the school district may not refuse to enroll or otherwise penalize a patient or persons enrolled in the Minnesota Patient Registry Program. And it goes into more definition, but really, again, adding protections to any student or caregiver. And then under policy 419, tobacco-free environment, possession and use of tobacco, that is a revision to clarify the exceptions. So under statute 121A.08, that does now include smudging as an exception to this policy. And that language that is in the model policy really is word for word from the Minnesota statute as well. Any questions on those 4 policies before we move on to the second set? All right. The final 3 that we would like for your review and approval is changes to policy 514, bullying prohibition. And really, that again clarifies under training and education, really changing the shall to a must, and that's through the Safe and Supportive Minnesota School Act. Again, really clarifying that it is not an option from shall to definite to a must. This also includes notices and a clear definition of where this policy does need to be posted, not only in our schools, but at district office as well. So that will be available to students, staff, and families. Policy 515 is a protection of privacy of pupil records, really defining a note for directory information. So there is the federal, but then also Minnesota has our own set of directory information that is available for, again, that protection and privacy of pupil records. This does add the opportunity for districts to share some student data with Department of Employment and Economic Development, so DEED, to better coordinate special education services and that pre-employment transition for students with disabilities. So really that adds an item for them, an opportunity to share data with Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development. And then lastly, policy 709 is student transportation safety. This is an item that Paul Durbon presented to the committee and really adds the statute language regarding e-bike safety. So you'll see that that states clearly that we need to provide that e-bike safety, but also that a person under the age of 15 is not allowed to operate an e-bike. So that again comes straight from that statute change. So before we head to the other policies for review, I would like to ask for your approval on those revisions.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the policy revisions as a block.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the policies as a block signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries 5-0. Now we'll move on to 9140. Ashley? Or Tanya, or?
Tanya.
Okay.
Yes, yep, so I can just, I'll pass it over to you. So with policy 9140 and 9190, these were also policies reviewed at the policy committee meeting, and Executive Director Franks will be presenting those tonight.
Tonight, we're bringing forward policy 9140. That is a current policy entitled Parental Review of Content and Instructional Materials. In January of 2024, we reviewed policy 604, which is instructional curriculum. Policy 604 was reviewed and approved in January 2024. With that policy, it addresses the parental review of curriculum and specifically states, the school district shall have a procedure for a parent, guardian, or adult student to review the content of instructional materials. So our recommendation this evening is to rescind the local policy 9140 as it's currently addressed in policy 604, but retain this as our procedure to support policy 604. So we're looking for an action on that policy.
We'll take the,
procedure.
yeah, we'll take these separate. So is there a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this rescinding 9140?
Yeah, so as I understand it, the current policy 9140 would be now essentially a part of the agreed upon 604.
Correct. It will become a procedure that attaches to policy 604. So that, those steps for parental review remain present.
Thank you. All those in favor of rescinding this policy signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Moving on to the next one.
The next one, bringing forward policy 9190. This is our current policy titled Student Publications. We would like to replace this with MSBA Model Policy 512, which is titled School-Sponsored Student Publications and Activities. The policy that we are bringing forward for 3 readings is the MSBA Model Policy. And this one will just be the first of 3 readings.
Any comments on this from the committee? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentations.
We're not.
One more.
One more.
One
Yep.
more.
So Chair Nelson, School Board Director, Superintendent Wagner, we would like for this evening to present the final reading and approval of policy 507.5, policy 503, and policy 621. So these were policies that we brought forward to the policy committee meeting in June. First reading in July, second reading in August, and tonight for final reading and requested approval. Again, policy 507.5, just regarding school resource officers, to reflect that statutory requirement for utilizing school resource officers, and then establishing those contract duties and training requirements as set by Minnesota statute.
Policy 503 looks at student attendance, again aligning us to Minnesota State Statute 120A35. This adds a religious observance accommodation and adds the required reporting components that include continuing truants. And then finally, Policy 621, Literacy and the READ Act. This keeps us aligned to the Minnesota law establishing the READ Act and other topics related to literacy. Policy 621 outlines our local literacy plan and the literacy training you have heard me speak to, as well as the staff development requirements that go along with the READ Act. So this evening, we're asking for approval on these 3 policies which are forward for the final reading.
Is there a motion for the final reading of these policies?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Before we adjourn, our next meeting is Monday, October 7th, and it will be a study session, and we'll be in room 109, so we'll be downstairs. And then Monday, October 21st is our regular session. And to remind us all to ensure individual academic, social, and emotional growth that leads to engaged citizens and lifelong learners is our mission. Meeting adjourned.